There's something wrong with my Dark Magician deck. What the f is a pendulum card? Hi guys, welcome to Bros.Gaming. My name is Brandon. Welcome to the channel, and let's return to the world of Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, I do apologise that there has been a bit of a gap between this episode and last episode. A lot of reasons why this episode was delayed. Honestly, I feel like this video is cursed. This is probably the third time I'm recording this. I do gotta tell you, these videos take a lot of effort, time and money to produce. As you're going to see in this video, there's a lot of product I'm going to be showing you. There'll be box sets or some other weird stuff that I've gotten in that time. If you do appreciate the kind of effort that I do put into the videos, please do me a massive favor, guys. If you do like the video, make sure to like the video. It does help get these videos out into the algorithm. YouTube likes, believe it or not. And they also like comments and all that kind of stuff. So if you want to help the channel grow, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment on the video if you have any inputs into what I'm about to tell you. This vlog is going to be a pretty big one. Unlike most vlogs which cover 1 or 2 weeks of me playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, this vlog is going to cover an entire month. So this vlog will be covering just after my first OTS Championship with my Dark Magician deck until my second OTS Championship, which took place in mid-November. And the other thing that happens during this time is 2 very important sets are released in which radically change the landscape of Yu-Gi-Oh! Into one of the scariest times to be a returning player. There's a lot that happens in this time and a lot of things that go wrong. I thought it was really important to be honest in my journey returning to the game, and I felt like it was really important to document the downfall of Dark Magician. So our journey begins just a week after my very first OTS Championship. Actually, I hadn't tested my OTS deck in Grand J Games because, as you remember in the last episode, I made radical changes to it before I actually entered the OTS Championships. I was really curious to see how well it would stack up against the usual crowd of Grand J gamers. Now, the very first duel against Shadol Telements is really interesting. Now, I felt like that I kind of got a good handle on how Telements work, but still trying to get my head around Shadol's as an archetype. In the very first round, my opponent won, and in the second round, I won. And these were some phenomenal back and forths. I was at the top of my game versing Telements, and I was so happy with how I was going. My opponent, Marcus, is a phenomenal player. I versed him a handful of times throughout the series, and he's always been really generous in playing with me. Even though I've been back for a few months now, still very much learning how to play the game, and Marcus is always very generous with his time with me and allowing time to explain how some of the cards work for his, as well as being a bit more forgiving if I might take a bit of time with some others. But that's been something I've been really focusing on as a duelist, is trying to make sure I'm quick with my plays. And I'm very conscious of how I play as a newish player, and so I do very much appreciate it when I'm with duelists. They're very understanding, and to be honest, I've actually never really faced that at Grand J Games. Every single person I've played with has been phenomenal, and I am so lucky to be amongst some really good people. Unfortunately, when we got to round 3, there was very little time in a duel to go, so I went into my turn, set up a very, not a weak board, but an okay board, and Marcus was very generous enough to call the duel a draw from there on. So the very first game after returning back from the OTS was a draw. Game 2 was a totally different story, a very different deck than I've ever played against before. The duelist described it as an Earth Machine deck, and as much as I tried to floodgate him with some of my usual tactics of spellcasters and Secret Village and all that kind of stuff, his Earth Machines are just phenomenally powerful and very easily got over any tower that I tried to set up with my cards, and he was able to very quickly take those games.
Yeah, so when you're
Game 3 was with one of my favourite teenagers at Grand J Games, Harrison. He's the one who runs the Utopia decks that you may have seen in the past few episodes. And whilst I was able to win that game against Harrison, he's becoming a lot more smarter as a player, especially considering he's up against some very tough duelists, not including me. The very last game was a very grindy game against Ryan, and at that time Ryan was running a dinosaur deck, which I f***ing loved. But thankfully, with my learning from Jacob in the previous episode, I kind of knew how the deck worked, knew which cards to stop before he could make any good strong plays. But some very, very strange thing happened. In the very last round, I was in the back rope, so I decided to pull out Mystic Mine, and then Ryan himself pulled out Mystic Mine on me. For a really long time, both Ryan and I were locked in a battle of Mystic Mine, in which neither of us could do a goddamn thing. Now, eventually the cursed powers of Mystic Mine wore off, and we both had the same amount of monsters on the field, and so we both went to work. However, I was lucky enough to get the upper hand, and I was able to win the third round, and I took another win on the board. So the very first time in the vlog series, I got a draw, and I also had 2 wins on the board and 1 loss. So I was very happy that my deck list for the OTS Championships wasn't a fluke.
So you would have typical hand board would be this. Dominance, which is really cool because you can either look at the top 5 cards of your deck or the top 5 cards of the enemies, and then you can like rearrange it. What's really cool is once you do Fusion Destiny and bring this guy out, you'll have 3 monsters easily in the graveyard.
yeah.
Then still on your phase, or your turn, you'll go DP effect targeting Dominance, destroy both. Dominance 1, DP 2, so DP will bring back a Destiny Hero monster on your turn.
Yeah.
Dominance will bring back 3 Destiny Hero monsters on the turn it was destroyed. Okay. So you come back with DP, Dread or these 2, and then on the next standby, then you bring out this guy, Dread Decimator, which protects all your DPs from destruction. It's insane.
So because of the success of the last episode, as well as me kind of being on a high of doing well with my Dark Magician decks, I decided to treat myself with something very stupid. See, now I don't want to touch it. It's just... So I decided to get myself some Dark Magician Adidas slides. Silly as this is, the Dark Magician archetype's really important to me. It's my very first introduction to Yugioh, the very first kind of deck that I played as a kid, as well as the very first deck that I played coming back to Yugioh. The Dark Magician archetype is very close to my heart, and it means a lot to me, so as stupid as this purchase was, it's a memento for me. And guess where I'm storing them? Somewhere up in the cupboard. Oh, yuck. Why is it Velcro? Why is it Velcro? So hopefully you can see why I decided to get myself some Dark Magician slides. Maybe you'll catch me wearing them one day at locals, but that's going to take a lot of convincing.
I actually use a
Week 2 was a little bit different. So around this time we're nearing Halloween, and I love the atmosphere of Halloween, dressing up and all the spooky stuff that kind of comes along with it. And so I decided to actually take a break from Dark Magicians. I decided to debut a very early build of Danger Dark World deck.
I don't want to hear another word! You're a disgrace to the game!
I'm not going to bother showing a deck list because it's very incomplete. I would say it's more Danger than it is Dark World. Reason being is that I love the Danger archetype. I love the Danger archetype is because it's all about cryptids, and I think cryptids are so fucking weird but so cool. I love all the folklore surrounding like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster and the Mothman. I decided to make it a mission to try and build something with the Dangers, but I quickly learned that the Dangers themselves aren't really its own solitary thing. Usually they're paired with something else. So I did a bit of research trying to figure out what's the best kind of deck to pair it with. In the modern time, people were pairing Dangers with Telements, but Telements, I'm never touching them. I wanted to pair this with Dark World because I wanted to make it a bit more of a spooky deck. And in my research, I also found out that there is a Danger Dark World set coming out at the end of the year. It's just before my birthday as well, so I'm definitely going to get my hands on the deck. But in the meantime, just because it's Halloween, I decided to play my Danger Dark Worlds and see how it went. Spoiler alert, sucked. Honest, it performed so poorly, so it's definitely going back to the drawing board.
I guess you guys aren't ready for that yet.
Between weeks 2 and 3, a brand new set released called Darkwing Blast. Now, I'm pretty sure you all know about Darkwing Blast. It's a pretty popular set. It was one I was actually really excited for, and not for the obvious reasons. The reason I was excited for this Darkwing set is because of all the Bestial cards that are coming out with it. Excited for the Bestial cards, not because they're fantastic, but because they're an addition to their branded archetype. And the reason I'm excited for that is because I'm really kind of getting into brandeds as well. I'm not getting into them because they're a fantastic deck. I'm getting into them because I love the lore behind it. In my spare time, I watch a lot of YouTube, and I've been really getting into the lore behind the Fallen of Albaz cards and the Despia cards and Tri Brigades and so on. And I love the hidden story behind it all. I've been watching a channel called Golden Nova Yugioh, which I'll include in the links below, who has a fantastic series on the story behind Fallen of Albaz, the Dogmaticas, the Sword Souls, the Despias and Tri Brigades and how they all fit together in this massive grand story. And I'm loving it. I'm so obsessed with it. And I can't wait to see how it all pans out. And I was really excited to get my hands on some Bestial cards. So with week 3, this is when things started to go wrong. My very first matchup I was against Stuart and his Branded Despia deck. Once again, very excited. I'm always happy to play against Branded Despias, and I'm also very kind of aware on how to counteract his cards. However, I didn't anticipate how detrimental Bestials to me. Stuart was able to win one, I was able to win one. Once again, we went to time, and we both decided to call it a draw. Game 2 was against Drytron. Encountered them a few times in Master Duel, and I can't even explain to you how terrifying this iteration is. I was so overwhelmed by all the comboing that he was able to do, and I very quickly lost game 2. Game 3 was against Fluffy. Normally this is a deck I can get around, not easily, but I don't know what the hell happened, but I lost again. Excluding the Dark World deck, I was looking down the barrel of 2 losses, and which hadn't happened in a very long time. And so in the last round, I was up against Ryan for the 3rd week in a row, and he had Sun Avalon. And as you know, Sun Avalon runs circles around Dark Magicians, and I lost. I hadn't even made any changes to the deck. And suddenly, my Dark Magician deck, which was performing really, really well, has fallen apart. Admittedly, it left me pretty shaken in that I didn't know what to do with the deck. I didn't know what changes I needed to make. Suddenly, the cards that I was consistently making for the past few weeks were just not happening. And to make things worse, another set came out. Magnificent Mavens. Now, despite this set being dreaded in that it would be releasing the Ishizu cards, I was really excited for the set because it had some much needed reprints that I was after. The sets that have been releasing this year have been fantastic for returning players in that they're releasing reprints of much needed staples. In the set, there's a whole lot of cards that I'm after. I want to get my hands on Evenly Matched. I want to get Triple Tactics. I want to get Goes and Match. There's a classic Change of Heart, classic Harpy's Feather Duster. I've reprinted a whole bunch of Sword Soul cards that I'm excited to get my hands on, as well as a Blackluster Soldier of Chaos. So I bought myself a display of Magnificent Mavens to hunt down some cards. That was the worst box pull I've ever had. I didn't get a single main target card that I wanted to get. Granted, there were some cards that I was able to get, like Sword Soul Iris, Change of Heart, Harpy's Feather Duster, but nothing that I really desperately needed, like Evenly Matched or Triple Tactics or Goes and Match. In case you're a new player watching this, Yugioh is so expensive to get back into, and I learned a really, really hard lesson buying this display that just buy singles. After a pretty unfortunate box opening, I headed into week 4 of local tournaments. Now I do apologise that I'm not really getting into the play-by-plays of in each of these games. So game 1 was against Earth Machines again. I lost. Game 2 was against Heroes, which I always loved playing against, but I lost. Game 3 was against True Jaco. I lost. Game 4 was against Fluffles once again, and once again I lost. So I was a bit heartbroken in that my Dark Magician deck is dying. It's sad because I've put in a lot of work into it, and it's a deck that I'm really passionate about. And I've always known that Dark Magicians are not a good archetype, but to see it fall apart like that was just devastating. But I'm lucky in that in this time that I've returned to Yugioh, that I've surrounded myself with some amazing people, and I got some help from our very favourite hero player, Kerem. So it's time to rebuild the Dark Magician deck. And so Kerem took my deck list and pretty much pulled the whole thing piece by piece to see what cards were necessary to the deck, what cards aren't. And unsurprisingly, a lot of the Dark Magician core was cut out, and we decided to start leaning more towards the branded kind of stuff, in that the branded cards are just so much more powerful. but keeping in mind that we still wanted to make sure that this was a Dark Magician deck at the end of the day. So I was happy in that the main aspect of Dark Magicians was still there. There were just some cards that are normally run in the deck, like Eternal Soul or Dark Magical Circle, that were just completely cut, because those cards themselves have ended up being bricks to me in these past few weeks. Now, Kerem also enlisted help from Jacob, who's also appeared on the channel in the past, to help me try and build some new stuff. And together, they both took my deck away, rebuilt it from scratch, and we did lots of testing. And so I was introduced to the world of Dueling Book. Admittedly, this is the very first time I've been using Dueling Book, and it's such a handy tool to be able to build decks, especially if you don't have the cards to yourself. This entire time that I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh, I've only been playing with cards that I have available to me. And so with the testing from Dueling Book, we were able to figure out what cards were necessary and what cards weren't, in order for me to go out and buy the cards I needed to get. I had such an amazing time with Kerem and Jacob, just watching them build the deck and testing out different iterations of it and seeing what worked, what didn't work. And I know that they were helping me rebuild for the fun of it, but honestly, them taking time out of their own day to work on a Dark Magician deck, it meant so much to me, and it still does. So Kerem and Jacob, if you're watching this, honestly, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for trying to help me fix Dark Magicians. A lot of work went into this, and I can't thank you enough for all the work that you did. And so after a lot of play testing and iterations from Jacob and iterations from Kerem and some of my own input on what I like the best, here's my new Dark Magician deck list. So the main idea of this deck list is that pretty much it's a Dragoon Turbo deck list. So the main two routes of getting Dragoon out in this iteration is using Fusion Deployment to bring out Dark Magician, and then fusing away with my many Dragon targets that I have, or using a classic card like Artemis to bring out Dragoon. The second route of bringing out Dragoon, as well as some much more powerful monsters, is the branded route. I already started working with it in my previous iteration of the deck using Lebellion, but with this new version of the deck, I'm now more comfortable with banishing cards and recycling them to bring out Dark Dragoon. And also, for a little bit of cheekiness, as you can see, I decided to chuck in Red Eyes in the deck. Now, chucking in the third brick in the deck isn't a great decision. And so now, with this deck, I have so many ways of getting into Dragoon, as well as some big powerful monsters. And I also managed to get my hands on Evenly Matched and Triple Tactics finally, at the expense of my bank account. Whilst the deck in our mind wasn't final, it was really important to test it out at a local level. And so, with this new iteration of Dark Magician deck, it's time to duel.
You know what's too many of?
Tell me.
Triple Tactics.
No, Triple Tactics. You only need 3 because it's 3. Triple Tactics. It's triple Tactics.
Game 1 was against Agents once again. It was nice to see these cards back in action, but suddenly these cards that were working fantastic in Dueling Book and were able to make all these crazy plays, I didn't see any of them. The only thing I could do was set up a Dark Law and pass. It just was not enough, and game 1 I lost. Game 2 was a completely different matter. I was able to get some good cards in hand, and I was able to start interacting with my opponent. Now, if we want to talk about MVPs of the deck, the Bestials are f***ing fantastic. They interact so well with decks that are light or dark. I was able to banish key cards that he needed, and I was able to get some Bestials on the board. And once the Bestial's on the board, I can start going into my Dragoon routes. And so, game 2, I was able to pretty quickly bring out Dark Dragoon and start burning and attacking away at these cards. Now, it came to a point where my opponent, Corey, was pretty much ready to scoop that round because he believed he didn't have any way out of it. Now, returning to the game, I've decided to myself that I want to play as fairly as possible to any person I play with, regardless if it affects me winning or losing. I never intentionally time out my opponent. I will let my opponents make replays if I think it's fair enough, because at the end of the day, I just want to enjoy some good card games. And I really like playing with Corey. He always has great insights into my own cards and the deck and stuff, so I felt that I owed it to him to try and figure out a way out of it. And sure enough, he did, but in a very unexpected way. So both Corey and I were on very low life points. Corey was on 600, I was on 900. Now what he did was he revived Majesty Hyperion from grave and attacked into Dragoon. Now, Hyperion's effect is that any battle damage taken to him also happens to me. And so because of the 900 difference between Dragoon and him, we both took 900 life points that we both dropped to 0 at the same time. So in an epic draw, we then went into game 3. Game 3 was a much better game for me in that I once again was able to use my Bestials to bring out Dragoon and burned away at his monsters until I was able to take all his life points, which then in the end ended up being a draw for the both of us. Game 2 was against a branded tier deck, and in my very first duel, my opponent did a Red Eyes Dragoon village lockout on me. And so my immediate thought was, you son of a bitch. And so I was like kind of stuck for a hot second there. But fortunately for me, I was able to link away into Blackluster Soldier Chaos, and I was able to get over his Dragoon by banishing his Dragoon. And it's not a nice feeling to get rid of Dragoon. Dragoon's like probably my favorite card in the game.
Because he's my best friend, he's my pal, he's my homeboy, my rotten soldier, he's my sweet cheese, my good time boy.
So I was able to take game 1, but branded tier limits did what they did best, and I ultimately ended up losing game 2. Game 3 was against Kerem and his revamped hero deck. So his deck is a bit different from the last time I dueled him, in that his deck has a lot more Destiny hero cards in it, and Kerem is so fun to duel against.
The one time it's not a high roll. Start of a...
I'll go first.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Good luck, friend.
Like, even though we're both trying to get a win and do well in locals, we're just having fun. It's what I really wanted coming back into Yugioh, is just have fun and play games and stuff. I was at a bit of a disadvantage in that because of his research, he knew pretty well how to get around my deck, and he won. So the last game was once again against Fluffles. Whilst I tried my best to stop some of his cards using my Bestials and getting Dragoon out, for some reason my deck just could not handle his Fluffles, and I lost. Final score of this new deck in a local tournament was a 1 draw, 3 losses. And so, whilst on the surface this looks pretty grim, I was able to recognise pretty quickly what cards were working in the deck, which ones weren't. And so that night, I was able to go home and make adjustments. So being happy with this iteration of the deck, which felt more me, I submitted this list to the next OTS Championships, which were taking place at a new store that I hadn't been to, Legends and Collectibles.
Yeah! 9 cards in it. That's a pretty good opening. It's actually just okay.
So I wasn't as nervous as I was the first time going into an OTS, because I'd kind of experienced it before. I had plenty of games and I had a really good time there. Plus it was also nice in that this time around at this OTS, there was a lot of duelists from Grand J Games, and they're such a fun bunch to be around, and I was really excited at the chance of potentially being able to play them in a championship. Game 1 was against Sprite, and honestly I was a little bit shook in that out of all the testing, I don't think we had anticipated sprites. Honestly, I had to try and guess on how the sprites worked. I honestly didn't really know what to do in the game. I was a bit lost. So all I could really do was attempt to try and floodgate him in any way I could, using Dark Lord by preventing him from using his grave, or using Eradicator to try and prevent him from using his spells. However, those games ended very, very quickly and I lost. Now, it was a bit disappointing in that I wasn't able to set up any of the plays that I once again prepared for. It didn't really have a good gauge on whether or not the deck was working or not. However, based on the games that I played in the day beforehand, as well as this, it started dawning on me that whilst Dark Magician decks are generally going first, I found that this deck, whilst it wasn't intentionally built for it, was a going second deck. I didn't realize this until too late, because game 2 was against Shizu Tillman. Now, if you've been following the meta game, which I'm pretty sure most of you have, Shizu Tillman is a tier 0, and it is the best deck in the game by far. And even though I had my deck milled a little bit, I found it wasn't actually an issue, which was pretty surprising. And even with that kind of discovery that it goes okay with being milled, once again I just could not set anything up that I had built towards, and unfortunately, once again, I lost. Going into an OTS Championship, I wasn't expecting to go amazing. I knew that I was going to be coming up against very, very powerful decks, because after all, it is a championship rather than a local. And so the games are played very differently, and it's very, very serious. And I was also at the same point that I was at in the first OTS Championship, in that I was down 2 losses, and so maybe we can make magic happen twice. Game 3, and I apologize again in advance that I can't get this deck name right. I was once again versing an Umi fish deck. I don't know what this deck is called. I'm just going to call it the fish deck until someone tells me otherwise. Unlike the previous 2 games, I was able to make the plays I needed to make. So I was able to start getting out Dragoon, I was able to start getting out some of my branded cards and Bestials, and creating some formidable boards. My main issue that I faced with this Umi deck was that some cards prevented me from using more than one monster in the field, so it ended up being that I had to solely rely on Red Eye's Dark Dragoon. And this also became an issue when his cards became protected from card effects, so I could no longer pop and burn. And so it became a bit of a grindy game in trying to figure out a way to try and damage him while relying on one card. So game 1 he won, game 2 I won. So after some long grinding games, we were looking down the barrel of finishing game 3 in 2 minutes. So all that meant was that he was only able to set up something in the first turn, and I had to try and go for lethal in my turn. And so we quickly started as fast as we could in the race against the clock. He went first, he set up his usual Umi board. I actually had a fantastic hand in that I could have gone into Dragoon that couldn't be targeted and could pop his monster and burn for damage. But I was really conscious about time. So not thinking, I decided to go into Timaeus as a big beater and try and deal in some damage. Now unfortunately, he had a trap in way in that it reduced Timaeus' attack to 0 when I attacked, and so I took the damage instead, and because of that I had less life points than he did, and I lost. Whilst I lost this game, it was such a fun game. No longer was I playing against ridiculous tier 0 decks. I was playing against a good strong deck that I was able to go up against, and he was able to push back. So that's what I love about Yugioh, is these push and back games where he's doing something and I'm doing something, and that whilst it's difficult, we're both still able to make plays and try and make big decisions. And I love that kind of stuff. It's so intense, and to lose in the last second like that felt like such like an anime moment, and it was really cool to experience, even being on the losing side of it. So it was a pretty cool loss to have. Game 4 ended up being a bye, so I couldn't do anything in game 4, which was a little bit frustrating in that I wanted to try and push further and see how it went. Granted, having the buy meant it was an automatic win. It felt a bit wrong in that I didn't earn it. Game 5, and my last game was against Grand J resident Dylan. He was playing Fluunderies.
Fucking birds!
Now, I can't explain how fucking frustrating this game was. My deck was completely torn apart by a single card. The fucking wind barrier statue. Because it was a Fluunderies deck, it did what it did best, just swarming my field with birds, tributing away my big monsters, and then locking me out with the barrier statue. And unfortunately the deck is based around special summoning dark monsters as well as banishing, and both of these things are no problems to Fluunderies, and so I lost. Now if you are interested in Dylan's fantastic Fluunderies deck list, I've included it in the description below. Definitely make sure to check it out. Now, unfortunately, what this did mean was that I came 24th out of 26. Losing like that just feels bad. And it makes me think to myself that Dark Magicians just can't be saved. And my whole goal with the deck was to try and push it as far as I could. And unfortunately, I have reached that stage where I think this is as far as I can push the deck. And unfortunately, the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Has changed so much. Not since I was just a kid, but within the space of a month. And even though that this might be the end of Dark Magicians for me, I've had such a good time with the Dark Magician deck, and not just because of their nostalgia for me and how much they mean to me, like emotionally. The opportunities it's given me in meeting new people and making new friends and making new experiences. So I know I'm going to always cherish the deck, but I think it's time for Dark Magicians to rest. So I have no idea what the future's going to hold in terms of what I'm going to be playing. I've got a few different ideas of what I could go towards or build towards, whether that be Danger Dark Worlds or trying to expand on my branded Despiers, but who knows? The future is kind of uncertain, but kind of exciting in that I have now returned to the world of Yu-Gi-Oh! And there are so many exciting possibilities. So thank you once again for joining me for Let's Play Yu-Gi-Oh! I super appreciate you for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you when I see you.